you. But at least you have a mix this one. It's going to be wonderful. Before I introduce our guest, do I need to introduce myself? We are in full gear. Dina informs me that we have a tentative date for the Spring Women's Night Out on April 20th with our local author, Linda Agnes, and she's written a book about life among the Amish, and she's going to come and talk. You say potato, and I say potato, you say Amish, and I'll say tomato, Amish, tomato. And in the fall, we've also got a tentative guest speaker, a woman who does a program on Marjorie Rawlings for the Yearling. She does like an impersonator kind of thing, and we're hoping to get her in the fall. Just to tell you that this coming Thursday, Roger Plum, some of you may know him, he's going to be doing a program on Afghanistan. He has traveled to Afghanistan. He's done some mediating between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, so he knows what he's talking about. There's a wonderful book out.
I've got one
I read the book, I read the article from the source. It's very incisive, and so I think it's going to be very interesting to hear. And then when he's on Oprah, we'll say we knew him when. Oprah, I got that right? Then I wanted to let you know you're all invited after the program. We have refreshments in the meeting room. The cake was provided by Yemis. And this whole evening, our guest speaker and other things that cost money are provided by the Friends of the Library. So we have a very nice supportive Friends group. We also have a very nice supportive director, Ross, who lets us do things we want to do. And you need to know that these programs are a collaboration of the staff, but Dina, she didn't want me to say anything, but what can I do, Dina? People know. And she's getting these things organized, and and she's doing the the graphics, but she's really keeping it going, and it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. There is a drawing. If you haven't, there's a drawing, right? Have you signed? Paper, yes. So if you haven't, you want to do that. We are also very grateful for the models. You'll see we have some wonderful models. We're going to come out in a moment. And Florence, where are you, Florence? Florence did our flowers and brought flowers today. We also took flowers from gardens. If you're missing any, too bad. No, we got permission. You got permission, didn't you, Dina? Who would say permission? I know. And now I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Valerie Van Kooten. She was here last year, did a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful program on vintage clothing, of which I thought, I don't care about vintage clothing. I was so fascinated by everything she did. It was just, she's a wonderful storyteller, too. And today, she's going to be talking, let me tell you, Valerie is a member of the Humanities of Iowa Speakers Bureau. She also teaches technical writing at Central College in Pella, and she works as a freelance writer and editor. She has been collecting vintage clothing and their histories for the past 10 years. And I believe she gets mail addressed to the old clothing lady or the
you don't
have to put her name on the envelope.
It just says woman who collects old clothes in Pella, Iowa.
Right.
And I get it.
It doesn't go to the good mail, it goes to her.
Yeah.
And 90% of her collection was originally worn by Iowa women. She regularly presents programs to a variety of audiences. Sometimes she has men in the audience, but we don't want that. Women, school groups, and senior citizens alike. We are really, really thrilled that you're here again.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. How many of you were here last year? Oh, less than half. Okay. Well, you'll probably remember some of the details. I'm really excited about this show because this is my wedding dress show. And I've done a few short ones, like 20-minute ones, but I haven't done a full one. So, and these dresses, a lot of these have not been out of my closet for 10 or 15 years, and I decided, this is silly. Some of these are so fantastic, I'm going to start putting them on models. And that gets me a lot of criticism from people who are purists in vintage clothing, and they say, you should be donating it to a museum or something like that. Well, I'm a living history type person, and I'm a hands-on person, and I want you to see what they look like, because there's such a mystique about weddings. A lot of the models already were saying, well, a lot of these aren't white. said, no, that's right. A lot of them weren't, because Iowa women, if you know anything about them, they were practical, and they had practical colors and styles and fabrics. And most women before about, even into the 30s and 40s, many women could not afford to be married in a white dress because it wasn't practical. And they had to have something that they could wear to church and wear to other occasions afterwards. So you had your best dress. And many of my wedding dresses are black. I don't have any black ones tonight. Because the feeling was, women have told me that their grandma or great-grandma would tell them, if you have a dress you can be married in and go to a funeral in, that's all you need for good dresses. So black would fit both of those. So tonight you're going to think, boy, it doesn't look much like a wedding dress. But I know who wore some of them. Some of them I have no idea, but I know that they did all come from Iowa. So we'll show you tonight about 125 years of wedding dresses. Our oldest dress that I have with me is one of the first I ever collected. It's the oldest in my collection. It's my favorite dress, and this is the first time I've ever had it on a model. So come on out. We're ready for you. From 1855. Now, this came from Waukon, Iowa, which is way up in northeast Iowa, almost north of Dubuque, almost on the border up there. I got it at an auction. I don't know much about the woman or the family who got it. Originally, it would have been worn with a jacket buttoned with nothing underneath it, but I didn't make her wear corsets, so she can't get the top buttoned. But a fantastic dress. What tells me right away when I look at it was this was no ordinary farm family. Because Waukon is almost on the river, it's very possible that this family, because the auction had wonderful things on it, it's possible that the family was in some sort of shopkeeping or had a higher position, because there were a lot of fantastic clothing and the furniture. So I'm thinking it was a wealthy family. 1855, Iowa had only been a state for less than 10 years. And so that's what makes me think, not many women of that era could afford something like this. It was silver. It's turning almost an olive green, but it was silver and burgundy when I first bought it. The hoops came with it. I have to show you the hoops. Can we show them how awkward these things are? Well, where did they go? There they are. Okay. There they are. They're like a bell that you step in. She's like, so it took me a while to get into it with the skirt, because you have to step in, pull it up and fasten it, and then put the skirt over it. But the hoop skirt in 1850s and early 1860s was very big. If you think Gone with the Wind, the very, very large skirts. In Iowa, they didn't get quite that big because women were too practical for that. It was very hard to go to church or go to a meeting with really, really big skirts. So in Iowa, you don't find hoops nearly as big as you found, for instance, down south. She was telling me she's from Louisiana. So your ancestors probably had the very, very, very big hoops, but in Iowa, you don't find as much of that. The hat was a common type of hat from the 1850s, and the muff was a very common type thing too. I've seen pictures of brides from this era who had a muff instead of a bouquet, and that would be something more practical than a bouquet, which was going to wilt or die right away, and a muff would, be decorative and keep your hands warm at the same time. So our bride of 1855, I have to say, is probably not a typical bride. She's not what everyone would have been wearing, but she's certainly a fantastic example of the 1850s. Thank you. It's silk. It's silk, which is why the problem with silk, you're going to see this on some of the other dresses too, is that it tends to want to start ripping and tearing right away. Silk is not a good keeper. So that's one bad thing about wedding dresses made of silk. They don't keep very well. They start to tear and split. Our second dress I'm just going to show you because we didn't have a model small enough to get it on. This came from the same estate, same sale. I got that one. And I have to tell you about these two. There were 3 dresses on this auction. That one, and another one. And I had just gotten married. We didn't have much money, and I paid $75 each for these 2 dresses. And I was sick about it. And after I thought, my husband's going to kill me. Why did I do this? And a guy came up to me after the auction. He'd gotten there late. He said, I came from St. Louis for these dresses, and he offered me $500 for that dress on the spot. And that's when I knew. I said, no, I haven't enjoyed it yet. So maybe someday, but I have to enjoy it for a while first. This is from the 1860s, probably the same family since it came from the same auction. But you can see it's cut a little bit differently. The skirt is not as big. It probably would not have been worn with a hoop. It is very heavy. When you put it on, it's obviously for a winter or fall wedding. The russet, I love this color. I can't imagine being married in it. But the top is what is so terribly small. It looks like this. you know, but actually the waist, well, you can see the stays are sewn in. The difference between a corset and stays like this is what you find in most Iowa clothing. Corsets were individual garments that you put on, and you had to have somebody pull them tight for you in the back. If you've seen Gone with the Wind or Titanic, you know, where they're standing at the bedpost and yanking, that was very common. But corsets were more typically for wealthy women because you had to have somebody to pull it for you. Iowa farm wife is not going to have a husband who's probably going to tolerate sitting there pulling your corsets every day. So what most Midwest women did, or women who weren't as wealthy, was you had your corset sewn right into your jacket. They were called stays. And then at one time, well, there were these things. This would actually pull it closed, and you could pull them tighter and tighter and tighter however you wanted them. You can see this is the waist of this is not very big. You could pull them as tight as you wanted, so they were kind of a do-it-yourself corset. And so women who were not as wealthy had this. Women who were very wealthy, the silver and burgundy jacket does not have the stays in it. She probably had an individual corset, which is another indicator that she was a wealthier woman. So it's a fantastic dress. It buttons very, very high-necked. It almost chokes you when you have it on. But all this scalloping and stuff, and it has the big black bow down the back. When it fastens, it looks like a bow hanging all the way down to the hem of your dress. So a great dress, unfortunately not wearable. Our next model, come on in. Here's one you're not going to think of as being a wedding dress. Came from Breda, Iowa, which is up by Carroll. I just got this one this past spring. And the woman who gave it to me said it was her great-grandmother's. Her name was Sophie Whittier. She was married in a Catholic wedding, and Breda is a very Catholic area. And she said, I wore this in like a church mother-daughter thing. And she said, I redid the bustle. If you saw this thing, it's got like a pillow in the back for a bustle. The corset that would put you in that would put you in like this. So you had this back sticking out with the bustle. Gray, of course, when you pull up this one layer here, you can see what the original color was more of a dark gray, so it's really faded over time. But this is the kind of dress that would have been seen as practical and serviceable, and this is a very small farm community, Breda is, so it was seen as something that she could wear again. 1870s, the bustle starts coming in. If you were here last year, you heard me talk about bustles. But they got to be so big by the late 1870s that, well, what Godey's Lady Book says is that you should be able to put a tray of food on your bustle and not have it fall off. So they would go straight out. I mean, within another 5 years from now, this bustle would be probably out to here, like this. And if you get to Washington, D.C. or New York, go to some of the museums of clothing, those bustles have tape measures that go out like 32 inches straight back. Very difficult to sit down, very difficult to maneuver in them. But that's the way the bustles were. And they really didn't serve any kind of a purpose except for decoration. They didn't have any other purpose. So bustles were kind of a pain, but by the mid-1880s, they were pretty much gone. And I think a lot of women sigh of relief because they were uncomfortable and they were impractical. This is a pretty simple bustle. I have one, I don't know if I told you about this last year, the waterfall bustle that gave you this lovely flowing look down the back, and it looks like, well, it looks like 3 bed springs. They're each about this long, and they're tied or wrapped together with muslin. You tied them around your waist, and then they'd hang down the back of your dress. Well, to keep them from flopping when you walk, they would also not only tie at the waist, they'd tie in front of your knees. So you had a double tie to keep them from flopping. So you can imagine you can imagine sitting on that. They were not very comfortable.
My wedding.
Thank you. A small bustle. What year were you married? 47, okay. This is I would say 1875, 1876, somewhere in there. Yeah. As we get into the 1880s, the bustle changed. It went to the hips. And at first I always, you think, who would want a bustle on their hips? That's probably an area you don't want to make larger. But when you see women in these, like in pictures, you can't tell if they're big or not because they have these huge bustles and hoops on. So they were kind of a good idea. Our next bride came from Washington, Iowa, which isn't too far from here. All I know about her is that her last name was Meinert. So I don't know if any of you know any Meinerts in the Washington area. I bought this at an antique store, the Wooden Wheel in Washington, and Marilyn Wooden told me some what she knew about it. The great-granddaughter of this woman consigned it to the store, and then I bought it from Marilyn. And so I got a hold of this woman, and she did not know her great-grandmother's first name, but she knew her last name was Meinert. And the Pannier bustle was very big in the late 1880s, and a Pannier bustle was one that gave you puffy hips, like this. And all they are is extra pieces of fabric that are sewn on and puffed out. And what she told me was that her great-grandparents owned a general store in Washington, and that you took feed sacks and you sewed them into the bustle to make them big and puffy. So the Pannier bustle was very, very large over the hips and then pleated in the front. You'll see a lot of pictures from the 1880s that have this same thing. Here's another example of silk dress. You can see any place that there's stress where it's a little bit tight, they start to do this, and that's the problem with silk. They just don't hold up very well. But taupe was another seen as a very practical color. She was married in November, and she told me that the buttons came from Muscatine, which is where the oyster, they picked up and made the pearl buttons. You can see where they were all stamped with the pearl oyster shells off the mussel shells off the Mississippi River. So there were several factories along the Mississippi that did that. And people tell me if you walked down there, a lot of times you'd find mussel shells with holes in them where they had punched the buttons out. So you've done that? Yeah, so you could see that was a big industry for a long time. There aren't any of them left, are there? Anybody know? I don't think so. They want you to turn. Okay. And again, this would not have been worn with the blouse underneath. It would have been worn buttoned and corseted. So, thank you. As we get into the 1890s, a couple of silhouettes came in. One was the leg of mutton sleeve, the very large sleeves that were puffy to the elbow and then tight down. The other thing that came in was the Gibson girl look. The Gibson girl look gave you the puffy front. It was called the pigeon-breasted look, and you were corseted to look like a backwards S, like this, the bust out, back out. Of all things, the corset that did that was called the health corset. And it was probably the unhealthiest thing that women could wear because it pulled their hips and backs out of shape. But for about 5, 6, 7 years, that was a very popular shape. Corsets really did a lot of damage. I'm thoroughly convinced that the corset is what caused women to die in childbirth, many of them. Because everything was pushed in and up. A girl would start wearing corsets or stays. I find stays in girls' jackets from about a 9, 10-year-old girl, 11-year-old girl. You wore corsets until you went through menopause or they went out of fashion. So corsets were really worn for a long time. They put 20 pounds of pressure per square inch on every part of you. And good corsets would advertise as being able to take off 6 to 10 inches off your natural waistline. If you see them, they start right under the bust line. They go down over the hips. Women were not as small as we tend to think that they were. That's another myth. They really were not a lot smaller. The Vogue magazine says the only place they've gotten bigger in the past 100 years is through the shoulders and through the feet. Yeah. Do you have a question?
What shoes would they wear?
Boots. The ugly brown boots. With a kind of a square, chunky heel and pointy toe that laced. Sometimes they had the button hook thing that would help lace them up. You really don't get pretty shoes until skirts got shorter. Because once skirts got shorter and the top of the shoe was showing, that was about 1914, 1915, then women decided, wow, I want shoes that are nice, that are pretty. But until then, they're kind of the ugly, clunky, square boots, sometimes in white or light tan, but very often black or rust or brown. Another interesting thing about shoes is that before 1900, if you were a wealthy family, you would have a cobbler make your shoes for you. If you were not a wealthy family, you could buy shoes, but they were not cut for right and left feet. Inside, there was like a thing you could trace around and cut out the inside to make a right and left foot. So you bought 2 shoes. And I've got some of these at home that were never cut. They just look like 2 shoes. They would fit either foot until you cut around to make them right-footed or left-footed. So before 1900, you've run into that.
I have a question about how these dresses are buttoned. It looks like they're all buttoned men's way. Instead of right to left, they're all buttoned left to right. The button is on the wrong side. At least it looks like that.
I don't know. I didn't notice that.
What was that?
I don't know. And I've heard so many explanations for why men's and women's shirts button differently. I've heard everything from It goes back to medieval days when men would pull a sword out of their thing. I've also heard that women always sat on a certain side of the church away from men so they would be able to nurse babies. They would have it buttoned a certain way so people couldn't see down their shirt. I don't know, and I've never found a really plausible explanation for why that is, and I didn't notice that on that last one either. I'll have to check that out once. I don't know.
Maybe so they know who's whispering.
Or maybe because if you were wealthy enough, you had someone buttoning you and they were standing opposite. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. What?
No.
Okay.
Probably good.
Yeah, I don't know.
What
Okay.
was the fabric of the second gown that was too little for?
That was velvet, this rust one. Yeah, it was velvet. And it's very heavy. If you want to come up afterwards and feel it, it's, I would think you would just die wearing it. It was very, very warm because you have to remember that this is the top layer. Now underneath this, you had a corset, you had a corset cover, you had a camisole, you might have what were called petty pants or underwear. You'd have 5 or 6 petticoats, depending on how much width you wanted in your skirt. If you were flat busted, this is before the padded bra, you pinned crinoline ruffles on your corset cover to make it look puffier in front. So you had a lot of clothing underneath these things. So, this was the top layer. She probably had 5 or 6 other layers of stuff underneath it. So that's what I always find so amazing is that these women would have to wear this much stuff. 1890s, Gibson girl coming in, they called the gay 90s, our 1890s bride. Come on in. From about 1897, 1898. This also came from Washington, Iowa. I don't know anything about the family except that when I went to this auction probably 15 years ago, it was in this armory, I think it is, in Washington, and it was a family that owned a general store. So not only did they have clothes, they had boxes of fabric from the 1880s and 1890s and patterns and all this stuff because they had owned this shop. It was just the most amazing auction. So I don't know who wore the dress. It might have been a dress that was on a sample to sell that never sold, or it might have been a family piece. I don't know. Very sheer. That's very typical. The 1890s dresses, the lawn dress or lingerie dress was coming in, and a lingerie dress was any dress that had to have a slip underneath it because it was sheer. I am almost betting that with the peach trim on this thing, the slip was probably also peach. Very often they would do that. They would match, if you put, for instance, lavender accessories with it, you'd have a lavender slip or mint green or peach or whatever. Peach was a very popular color before the turn of the century, and then it came back again in the 20s. You find a lot of peach clothing. This is that Gibson girl look. It's very, yeah, she kind of pinned it because she thought it felt too big, but it needs to be real puffy, blouson, hanging over, and then you would be corseted like this, and then you'd have your Gibson girl hairdo, which was, the loose puff up with the knot on top. And many of these dresses did not have veils or hats. Many women of this era were married with flowers in their hair or nothing, a circlet of maybe something silk in their hair, but big elaborate veils. Really, you don't see a lot of that before the turn of the century, and even really into the 20s and 30s, you don't find the great big veils. But this is our Gibson girl bride. Yeah.
I did a speech on wedding dresses like through the century, and I don't remember what years, but it said that before flowers came in, they would take bows and tie them real loosely on the dress, and then people, the guests would pull them off.
Oh.
And save those as like party favors.
Oh, neat. That would be neat. Yeah, I don't think those will come off, but that would be neat. A lot of times with wedding dresses, what's really interesting is oftentimes I'll find the name and date of the bride embroidered either in the waistband or the hem. I have one dress from 1885. I don't have it with me because it's really tiny, but it came with the invitation in a baggie pinned to the dress. So you know right away who wore it and when and where, and that's wonderful to have. Most times you don't get that. Occasionally you'll find I have one wedding dress that had a lock of hair sewn into the waistband. And I don't know if that was hers or her fiance's or husband's or what, but very sentimental, beautiful things that you find on dresses of this era. And many times they were made by hand, or had somebody make them for you. You really weren't purchasing a lot of ready-made clothing at this era. Questions thus far? Yeah?
What kind of fabric is
Well, I don't know. Was it hand? It's like a cotton. I think it's a cotton lace with maybe a silk blend. I don't know. We'll come by and let you can feel it once and see what you think.
Did they have machines then that did this work? Or
Yeah.
people?
No, I'm sure that this came on a bolt and somebody probably sewed the ribbons on is what happened. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
How do you keep it from not tearing?
Number one, I don't hang anything up. That's the one thing you have to learn if you have vintage clothing. Hangers are very, very bad for clothing because the weight, a dress like this would be gone in a year or two. The weight of the dress pulls down and it rips out the shoulders, especially those beautiful 20s beaded dresses. It just pulls the whole thing down. So most of these dresses, unless they're very, very sturdy, I roll everything. Get something with a high cotton content, like a tablecloth or a pillowcase or a towel or sheet. Lay your dress on it and roll it up like a jelly roll. And I've been collecting sheets from garage sales and everything for years and years and years. Still don't have enough. Right now I have about 3,000 pieces of clothing from the 1850s to the 1970s. And everything that's prior to about 1930 I try to roll because it's just too fragile. So I roll everything. And
In your home,
yeah, in my basement I have one big room, but I put everything in big Rubbermaid boxes. It doesn't take as much room as you'd think because I get everything out enough that the air is going to circulate. What's really hard to find storage for are the hats and the veils. Some of these hats are this big. You can't find hat boxes. They don't fit on a shelf. You know, what do you do with them? So they're what take a lot of room. Yeah. Another dress to show you, another one we couldn't get on, but I'm kind of glad because I wanted to show you the inside of this thing. This came from Des Moines, and it was worn by one of the Hubbell girls, Hubbell family, a very wealthy family. Some very typical things. I'm guessing she was married in about 1912 because these puffy things came back on the hips in about 1912. It was called the Harem look or the Tulip look, and it gave you this kind of a puffy hip and then very tight around the ankles. So that came in about 1912, and they told me it was worn between 1910 and 1915. So that's what I'm guessing. If you look at how the inside is made, this is why these dresses are deceptive. It looks like it would fit somebody until you look at, it has a built-in corset, you know, built-in thing that's going to corset you in before you actually corset or do the dress close. So it's not very big. It has a Paris label, which being with the Hubbell family does not surprise me. They're a wealthy family. And it's trimmed with the latest fashion of the day, monkey fur, which I am, if you're Dutch, you'll know this word. I am feast of this, you know. There's no good word for that outside of Dutch. It kind of gives me the creeps. But monkey fur, I'm told, was very big. And you can see what the original color was. Look at that aqua. That's how much it's faded over 100 years. So our bride of 1912 was very up to date. White dresses were not in so much. A light colored dress or brightly colored dress was very, very popular for getting married in. And yeah, she was quite up to date. But again, very small. And since nobody wants to be corseted, can't get them in it. Is Crystal ready yet? Okay, oh yeah, come on in, Crystal. Our bride of 1900 came from Des Moines. This always reminds me of Mary Poppins. I always think of, the mother in Mary Poppins had an outfit like this with a hat like this, and I always think of this, and that was 1910, and this was probably around 1905. And again, you can tell what the original color was. It was very bright. Definitely a springtime or early summertime outfit. The pigeon breast is still in, still that kind of a puffy front. It snaps down the back with a myriad of snaps. Go ahead and turn around. Is it down the front or the back? Down the front, okay. But the thing I like about this dress, that almost all outfits, two-piece outfits did this in 1900, was it hooked, there are hooks in the jacket and then eyes in the skirt, so you'd hook your top to your skirt. And when you see these pictures of women that look so starched and pressed and tucked in, it's because they were hooked all the way around. So if you lifted your arms or you bent over or you moved a little bit, the thing wouldn't pull out. Because that was sort of a cardinal sin of the early 1900s, a woman whose waist was not tucked in. You often hear about that, their waist. And a waist was just referring to a blouse or a shirt of some sort. And always wanted to keep that tucked in, so they would often button or snap inside. Other things about the hat, I love the hat. Very 1900s, would sit right on top of your head. You had very long hair, and of course it'd be up underneath it, and you'd have a couple, it'd probably sit a good 2-3 inches taller than this because you'd have hair down to your waist, but you'd run a couple hat pins through it, and it also has To help you keep it on, the strap, which did not go under your chin, went around the back under your hair or behind your ears to keep it on. So you would... probably, no, they're probably rhea or ostrich feathers dyed, is what I'm guessing. And you know, if you've got feathers, the same lady I bought this dress from, it came from Des Moines, that's all I know about it. I bought a whole estate. She sold me 125 hats and several pieces of clothing and 7 boxes of feathers. And I thought, man, what am I going to do with all these feathers? You know, I'm not a milliner. I'm not into redoing hats because I don't have the skill for that. So I had a friend who said, you know, put it on eBay. See what happens. Put a box of feathers on eBay. So I did that, and this box of feathers, there were about 20 of them. Most of them were black, and they were rhea and ostrich. Went for over $200 for one box. And I had like 25 feathers in there, and I was shocked. I knew that they were worth some money, but I didn't realize it. So I'm going to sell the other 6 boxes too. You know, my husband says, you're getting too much stuff. You've got to start doing some selling. I said, yeah, I know. So I've tried some selling over eBay, been happy with some of it and unhappy with other things, so you never know what's going to happen with that. But thank you very much. Shelby, come on out. We have another bride from about 1905. And I know the woman who wore this one. She's so little, we're having problems keeping anything on her. This was worn by, her name was Amelia Rose. Her daughter gave me the dress. And she told me that her mother was from Sweden. She came to America in 1900 when she was 20 years old. And then she got married here in Des Moines in 1902. So she was 22 years old when she got married. And the top is very sheer, a lot of work on it. Again, 1902, that pigeon-breasted look, so you were corseted like that. In her hair, she said her mother wore a big white bow, and that was another common accessory for hair in the early 1900s. And of course, you had your parasol for summer days. So then this is an outfit that she probably wore again for other occasions. You could do that to church or ladies' society meetings or something like that. So thank you. You want to stroll for us?
Carry the parasol down the aisle.
Probably not, no. But if she wore, well, she might have, if it were an outdoor wedding. I've seen pictures of bridesmaids carrying parasols in the early 1900s, but probably not the bride, or at least she would have given it to someone else when she was up there. Our next model, Crystal has to change again before we're ready for our next model. Anybody have any questions or anything? Anything you want to ask about? Yeah.
Where were weddings held usually? I know usually they were in the home, but you just now said outdoors.
Sometimes outdoors. The bride's home is the biggest time. You also find sometimes they'd be held in the pastor's home. Very few weddings of this era were in churches. That was just not done. In fact, it was seen as disrespectful in a lot of places. You did not get married in the church. That was not the place for weddings. So you get married in the pastor's home or your parents' home or an outdoor wedding. Those are the 3 probably highest choices.
When did churches start being
I'd say probably in the 40s and 50s. I know both of my grandparents were married in the 30s, were married yet in the bride's home. I don't know, any of you have?
My folks were married in church.
They were?
1923.
Really, in 1923. Was it a Catholic church?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Episcopal, okay. Yeah, someone else had?
Yeah, I was married in my grandmother's wedding now. She was married sometime in the early 1900s. I was thinking somewhere around 1906. And my mother was married in it, my sister. And
Okay.
I have photos of it.
Oh, great. Why don't you pass them around?
These white ones with but it has the Gibson rope thing.
Sure.
And then it has a train.
Did it have a hat or anything, or a veil?
We got a veil in the 60s for my sister, so I
Okay.
did that. And I don't know if
Why don't you just pass them around? That'd be great, yeah. Just lay them, that's fine.
There's 5 of these.
Okay. Yeah.
The last 2 dresses, what type of lady?
Well, this lady that came from Sweden that wore the white one was not a wealthy woman. The other one probably was a little wealthier gal. I mean, if I get them 125 years later and they're still wearable, we're probably talking wealthier family because they could afford to put them away and not wear them again. Both of my grandmothers were married in the 30s, and they were married in long dresses that I now have, but they're cut off because they wore them to church. And that was very common in the Pella area during the Depression. You had a long dress to be married in, but then you cut it off to street length so you could wear it to church. And they're faded. They were both lavender, and now they're kind of almost a pink. They don't look very nice anymore because they just wore them to death. So if I get them and they're in great shape, wealthy, that sells wealthy right away. Anybody else? I'm going to read you something before we're waiting for our next model. I love this. The other thing I collect are books for brides and like housekeeping manuals that tell you how to be a good wife and mother. And this is one that I got. It's published in 1922. It was published in Davenport. And the idea for it was there was a little gift book that came with it, and all these Davenport businesses advertised in here. Then you would go to each business and you'd have that business sign that you had gone into that business, and then you'd send in your certificate with all the signatures, and you'd get a gift. And you could choose from very practical gifts, like there's a clock, silver teaspoons, there's a cold meat fork and berry spoon, which I use often, I'm sure, a grinder, a food grinder, and a lamp and a manicure set, or ashtrays. So those were your gifts you could choose from. And this whole book is full of things like, how to set up your home and how to set up your kitchen. And the last page, we're living in a time, I guess, I kind of long for these times. We're living in a time where people are so quick to say, what's politically correct and what's not. But listen to what women were advised in 1922. To earn your husband's respect, you will, of course, be a good housekeeper. That's your job, and it's worthwhile doing well. Then, to keep his love and admiration, you will be a fine cook. It's marvelous to see grouchiness and ill temper disappear at the sight of a perfectly cooked meal. As a matter of fact, the man who is well fed by the directions given in this book is almost never cross. Nerves and bad temper do not exist when a man is well. Okay. You are the center of the home. It will mean everything to him to see you invariably neat and dainty, and this is possible even on cleaning day if you only realize that it's just as worthwhile to look pretty for your husband as it was when he was just your sweetheart. Be sure to include in your trousseau some pretty bungalow aprons and afternoon house dresses so that you will always look well dressed about the house. And just a word more, keep up with the times. Be as jolly as you were when you were engaged. Welcome his friends. Read the papers and magazines he likes so that you can talk intelligently on the subjects in which he is interested. Always take time to really listen while he talks about business. It's an incalculable help to a man to be able to talk things out. This is really thinking out loud, and many a man has accomplished marvels by talking out ideas to a wife who was a good listener. Remember, you're not only lovers, you're pals and partners. Happiness can be built only on such a foundation, and when it is securely laid on this basis, it is truly a pearl of great price. So, I love it. And there's all kinds of menus and advertisements. It's fascinating to see what women were expected to do and how they were expected to keep their house and do these kinds of things. So, is Crystal, yeah, go ahead.
My mother-in-law I wish I'd brought it because she would have loved this pinch. She just sold her farm and moved into a small apartment, and she gave me her wedding dress.
Oh.
And she's 83.
Okay.
And so I'm not quite sure what year she got married, but the dress is all satin.
Probably 30s.
And she had a huge bouquet
yes.
when she got married.
Yes.
I think she said she paid $5 for this
for the dress.
And it's very tiny. And I just wish I had brought it because you would have just...
Well, when you see our 30s wedding dress, you'll have to tell me if it looks anything like this. Okay.
You would have loved to have seen it.
Okay. Oh, yes, I would have.
Next time you come, I'll bring
And you...
it.
Oh, okay, yeah, good. I want to see it. Crystal, are you ready? Oh, our 20s bride. Come on in. 1920s, you first have to understand what was happening in 20s fashion. Skirts got very short in the 20s. I mean, short for the times. By 1925, they hit the knee, and that was considered very, very short for the time. This is pre-pantyhose. The flapper era is in. Women are rolling down their hose, rouging their knees. Women are bobbing their hair to wear the cloches. The cloches were the little tight-fitting hats. This is a cloche veil, and it's very rare. I ran across it in Davenport at Trash Can Annie's. If any of you frequent that vintage clothing store there, I love Trash Can Annie's. I bought it about 15 years ago, and she said, I've only ever seen one, and this is it. And I've never run across another one either, although I've seen some pictures. So the cloche veil was very much a 20s thing, if you had the money for it. The 20s bride skirts were almost always what we consider short, knee length. By the late 20s, they were very often short in front, but trailed in the back, a little longer in the back. So if you have a dress from that era, it's probably a little later 20s. The 20s are divided into three eras. Early 20s were long, straight, no waist, below the knee. Mid-20s were short and swingy, pretty short, sheer, and then late 20s were short and back and long, short in front and long in the back, so you can almost all identically date your dress. The cloche veil, of course, had the blusher, which most veils did, and at the ceremony you could take it back and put it back like this. Actually, you've got a ponytail. This thing would have been worn right like this, right over the eyebrows, very, very low. And in fact, our bride of 1922, yeah, you can see it was worn pretty low in front. To complete this, when I see pictures of 20s, big 20s weddings, they had huge bouquets, like you say. They'd come up to here and they'd go almost drop to the knees. Very, very large bouquets, beautiful. Also the era where you start finding beautiful shoes, because women wanted beautiful satin type shoes. The 20s shoes had big bows on top or rhinestones on top. Gorgeous shoes. Unfortunately, for some reason, when you find shoes from the teens and 20s, the heel is set in too far into the center of the shoe. You feel like you're falling backwards when you wear them. And if you look at them, the heel is like not at the back of the shoe, it's like 2 or 3 inches in. So I don't understand how exactly they kept their balance on them, because they're very difficult to wear. 20s clothing especially, if you're going to save it, roll it. Don't be putting it in on hangers, because it just won't last very long. Thank you.
How do you spell cloche?
C-L-O-C-H-E, cloche. The difference between a cloche and a toque, which is another word you may have heard, it's T-O-Q-U-E. Toques had little brims, cloches did not. And in order to wear cloches in the 20s, we talked about this last year, you had to cut your hair. You couldn't have that waist-length hair in order to get all that hair up under a cloche, so you bobbed it, so it was very short, and that caused a lot of problems in a lot of places. Women fought with their parents, they fought with their husbands, they fought with their fathers in order to bob their hair. There were churches that did not let women take communion who bobbed their hair. I know of a school system that almost didn't hire 2 teachers in 1926 because they cut their hair. I hear all kinds of stories. A woman who was a nurse who was fired because she cut her hair. It was a big deal. Any of you remember stories of your parents having problems, or you had problems yourself because you cut your hair? Nobody?
Cut my hair, unfortunately.
Well, what really happened in the 20s and 30s was women didn't object to it. The mothers weren't usually the ones who objected, because they were sick of that waist-length hair. It was the fathers and the boyfriends and the husbands who objected, and really caused a lot of problems for a lot of women. If you've read Cheaper by the Dozen, where these girls locked themselves in the bathroom and cut each other's hair because their father wouldn't let them, and they thought, what can he do, once we've cut it? That was a big deal. Parents were not happy in the 20s. The long underwear went, the kind you had to roll. Women rolled it up and down. Some of you remember that? They wanted to wear the little teddies, the little short teddies, and they wanted to wear sheer stockings. They wanted to paint rouge their knees. They wanted to cut their hair. It was not a real popular time for, parents didn't like it at all. So our 20s bride, you can see, was a lot shorter than the last ones. Our 30s bride, now you tell me if this looks like your mother-in-law's. No, okay. I have the picture. Solid satin, okay.
A little bit of lace.
This is a pretty popular look in Iowa for 30s wedding dresses, which is a satin slip, a tight satin slip with something lacy over it. Both of my grandmothers look like this too in the 30s. I have the picture of the woman who originally wore it. I'll pass it around. She was from Pella, and she died very young, never had children, so her sister ended up with all the wedding clothes. So I not only got the wedding dress, I have the man's suit, the tie, and even the little handkerchief that goes in the pocket, which is wonderful to have, but you can see even in the late 30s how big this bouquet was. I'll let you look at it. Yes, it does have a blusher on it too. There, like this. There you go. So that's how it looked in the 30s. And boy, that fits you just right. The length is just right and everything. But now see, if it were my family, they would have cut this off to here and wore it and probably made the veil. Well, my grandma, my mother's mother, who was almost 90, took my mother's 1950s prom gown, big net prom gown. It had a net stole that went around the shoulders, and cut it in half and strained grape jelly with half of it and hung onions in the basement with half of it. So that's my family, because, they went, you look at Depression era brides, most of my 30s wedding dresses are not white. A lot of them are just nice, what you'd call church dresses, a lot of velvet. During the Depression, a lot of women did not have the money to be married in white, or they shared a dress with maybe 3 or 4 sisters, and they'd all pass the same dress around and same veil around. So you still don't find white routinely being used in the 1930s, like we would think that you might. Yeah. Brassieres came in when the corset went out, which was after World War I. Corsets went out because they had steel stays. And in ladies' magazines of the day, you see big posters that say, "Ladies, turn in your corsets for your country," and they were melted down and used in the war effort. So, and I always think, I still talk to women who remember that, and I'll say, I'll bet women were really glad to get rid of corsets. That's not what I find. What I find is that either they were so vain about their small waist they wanted to keep it small, they continued to wear one, or they had, for the rest of their life, had back problems because they had been so used to being corseted so tightly in that thing. So I don't find this overwhelming joy at the corset being gone, but once the corset is gone, in the 20s, I start finding little handmade, hand-sewed brassieres. A lot of times they look like tube tops. They were kind of like an elastic tube top type thing. But in the 30s, definitely, you start finding brassieres. They usually had matching tap pants. They were beautiful sets when you find them. Okay, thank you. Our bride of World War II, come on in. I've never had this one on anybody, so I'm really glad. I just got it about 3-4 months ago. As you can imagine, well, any of you here married during the war? Did you have a white wedding dress? You didn't. What did you have?
It's amazing, a black wedding dress.
It's dark green. It's dark green, and it's got kind of a burgundy, sort of a, it looks almost purple when the right light hits it. It's got sort of an iridescent type thing. Anybody else here married during the war?
I was married in 46, right?
Okay. And you had a white dress?
I had a long white
Okay.
dress with a lace bertha and everything.
Okay.
That's definitely a wedding suit.
Oh yes, it was a wedding suit. Definitely. Anybody else married during the war? Yeah, what were you married in? So like that. What year was it? Beige, okay. What year was that? Right, this one's from 42, December of 42. The woman who gave it to me told me she couldn't have found white to save her life. She said even if I'd wanted to be married in white, she said, I didn't know when my fiance was getting leave, when he'd be home. She said, I got married in the first suit I found me that fit and looked good. And she said finding clothing, it was so difficult that it was just something I had to be able to wear again. And interesting, I've talked to women around Iowa who wanted to be married in white. And I've heard everything from women who were married in parachute silk. If you could get a hold of a good flawed parachute, it's beautiful, creamy silk. It's lovely. If you could get the whole parachute, you could make not only a dress, but a trousseau or a peignoir, lingerie set, a nightgown set with it. I talked to one woman who was married in a white eyelet shower curtain that her mother sewed up for her. Finding white wasn't always easy during the war. Finding any kind of fabric wasn't easy. And so many, many women I talked to who were married during the war were married in blue, green, pink, purple, whatever they could find. So very, very, I love the peplums of the 40s. This one's a really cool one. But peplums were, when you think of the peplum we had about probably 10, 15 years ago when they kind of came back, it looked like somebody tied a ruffle around your waist. They were real ungraceful. Peplums of the 40s were always graceful and they lay flat. And because dresses usually zipped under the arm, things laid very smoothly. So, turn around. Yeah, they want to see me. Yeah. And that's the thing. They didn't go around the back either. They just left it in the front. So, but I love 40s peplums. They're gorgeous. World War II fashion really was straight, tight skirts right about the knee. Not a lot of collars. Not a lot of pocket flaps. Even on men's pants, usually didn't have cuffs just to save fabric. So fashion pretty much shut down during the war. And how she got this one, I'm not sure, because I think it's pretty stylish for a wartime fashion.
You like it?
I do, I like it.
It looks nice on you, yeah.
Actually,
Thank you very much. If you were in the 40s, living in the 40s, you probably remember the most difficult piece of clothing to get with stockings. Maybe you wore leg makeup. Anybody wear leg makeup? Did you draw the seam up the back of your leg with an eyebrow pencil? Anybody do that? Stockings, the problem was nylon came in 1939. Des Moines had a nylon factory, Rawlins hosiery factory. But in 1941, when the war started, just 2 years later, nylon was ripped out of production so they could use it for the war effort for backpacks and parachutes. So women are like, we've had 2 years of nylon. It was just coming in. So what do? You could go with silk stockings, which pilled. You could go with cotton, which bagged. You could go with anklets, which a lot of women did, or you could use leg makeup. Or if you got a hold of a nylon pair, you treated them like babies and repaired your own. Did you have the hook? You could repair your own runs and everything, so you had those. But leg makeup, from what I've sing, wouldn't have been too bad if it weren't raining or 100 degrees and the stuff would run all over. Did it? Yeah. Oh, orangey, yes. It looked like, remember any of you living in the 60s and 70s when QT came out and you could tan yourself and you always had orange streaks all over? That's what leg makeup looked like. Now, women around Pella tell me that in order to wear leg makeup, I mean, women didn't really shave their legs. You couldn't use your husband's or dad's shaver. He'd kill you. There weren't really shavers for women. They tell me there were little round circles of really fine sandpaper that had a strap, and you sand your legs. You had that? You sand your legs? They still have them?
Yep. They have the sandpaper. You just stick your hands in and then you
sand your leg. Sand the hair off. You use them. Okay, yeah.
I've seen leg makeup.
Leg makeup.
Too,
recently coming back. Well, with people being scared to tan, I suppose leg makeup, tanning stuff does make sense coming back. But I can't imagine sanding my legs. The other thing I'm told is that lipstick came in wooden little containers because there was no more metal. It, like these push-up ice cream things you eat, it had a stick that you pushed up the little wooden thing. I'd like to see one. I haven't never seen one. To get out of the 40s, late 40s, the white dress really started coming in. Almost everybody in the late 40s and 50s was married in white. Late 40s and early 50s dresses were gorgeous, long. Anybody married in the early 50s have the big, what they called candlelight satin. It was off-white, kind of a tan, and beautiful dresses. By the mid-50s, we know skirts are getting bigger and bigger. Well, our brides' skirts were too. So come on in. Our 1956 bride. Now, show them your hoop. Yep. There it is. Okay. Our 50s bride, well, it was very difficult to sit down in these things. As you can imagine, you sat down and the whole thing would come up in front. My mom tells me she went to a wedding in 1959 where the bride fainted. And she said the bridesmaids were trying to hold her hoop down because her skirt was up like this to the entire audience. So they were not real practical, but even, this was called Ballerina-Length, and it was a very common length in the 50s. You'd have the ballerina slippers, and this dress, I don't know if it came with had a veil or not. It did not come with it, but it did come with the undergarment, which I'm not making her wear, called the Merry Widow. Remember that one? It was a very tight girdle that sucked you in so you could wear the clothing, because now, look at the back. Today, we would have a zipper hidden underneath all these buttons, but all these actual buttons, trying to get them all buttoned up was hard, and the Merry Widow would suck you in so you could do that. Skirts got very, very large in the late 50s if you were in high school or college then. Did any of you go to a school that had a rule about how many can-cans or how big your skirts could be? Some schools had rules. In Des Moines, North High School had a rule. You had to be able to walk through the bathroom girls' doors without having your skirt touch the doorway, because the skirts were getting so big that girls were pulling up chairs to their little one-piece desks because they couldn't fit behind the desk. They tell me on driver's ed day, the skirts would cover the whole car, inside the car. And on choir day, because you couldn't get these hoops, and can-cans under a choir robe, you'd take them off and set them in the bathroom with your name pinned on it, and you'd have all these starched and stiff can-cans standing in the bathroom so they could put the choir robes on. So very, very large. When I was in high school, we had 50s Day, and everybody was looking for the 50s clothing. About a year or two ago, I got a phone call from a girl at Pella High who told me she wanted to rent clothes, and I said, okay, for homecoming. And I said, what are you looking for? And she said, we're having 80s Day. I almost hung up on her. I said, I said, my mom used to always do the same thing. She's like, 50s day? That's ridiculous. She graduated in 59, so. Thank you. This is our June Cleaver bride. We'll call her that, okay. See, and that was the problem. See how she can't walk down the aisle? These skirts got so big, you had to turn like this to get down an aisle. 60s, I don't have a really good 60s wedding dress. What I'm looking for is the kind that was tight across the top, like high-waisted, and then split open in front. Early 60s, kind of a Jackie Kennedy type look. I do, however, have a 60s bridesmaid with us today. Come on in. 1965. Now, anybody here married between, say, 63 and 68? Did you have a bow on your wedding dress? In the front or back like this? High-waisted? In the back. Okay, who else? Anybody else married in those years? That's a really good time indicator, the bow in the front or the back or across your head or maybe on the shoulders. The other indicator is, how many of you who were married then had some shade of green for your wedding color? Anybody? You didn't. Do you have yellow? This bride had green and yellow, which it makes me a little seasick just thinking about it. But of all the dresses I have from this era, a lot of them are this bright lime or pea green or olive green, real bright greens, grass green, chartreuse. So it was a very popular color. Other things, the little tiny hat, sometimes a pillbox hat, and the long gloves, very Jackie-esque, which her look was very straight and very tailored, and with a string of pearls. So she changed. It went from very, very big in the late 50s to very tailored in the early to mid 60s. Mary Tyler Moore, yes. Your flippy hair, and that kind of came back, the flippy hair. Chartreuse came back too. It's back too. I like chartreuse, but I don't know if I'd want a whole dress out of it.
I feel I should be carrying a lava lamp.
Now this dress reminds me of Ginger on Gilligan's Island. She had a dress kind of like that, yeah. Thank you. Well, how many of you here still have, if you're married, still have your wedding dress put away?
I have my mother's also.
Your mother's also, okay. Great. Get them off of hangers, roll them up. The only thing you shouldn't roll is velvet. If it's velvet, lay it flat and kind of roll it, just put something around it, like swath it, kind of like a mummy. I get these big floral boxes, and they are great for wedding dresses. You can lay a velvet dress in there and then just roll it this way. But otherwise, roll everything because you're not going to keep it nice on a hanger, and you also don't want to get a lot of light on it. I used to do a lot of displays at Tulip Time in Pella in store windows, and my stuff would be in there a week, and I'd come back, bring it home, and the front would be 2 shades lighter than the back because the sun just bleached it. So I don't do that either anymore. So it's just some things you can do to keep your stuff very clean. This had has hints too about how to wash like white cotton clothes that are yellowed and stuff, and some really great hints. So I haven't tried those, but if you want to come up and look at those, you may. Anybody have any questions? I've kind of taken you through about 125 years of brides. Yeah.
Would you happen to know anything about marriage licenses? When they started being required?
Boy, I would think about as soon as the state started getting counties, they would have. I've seen some very, very old ones from the 1860s and 1870s. So I would think pretty close to when the state started. Once we had a county established, I'm sure the marriage license came in, but I don't know. No.
I've seen some of the old marriage records up at the courthouse, and the girl was under 15 or something. Her father had to sign for her.
Had to sign because she was so young. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I have a comment about my mother-in-law's wedding. She told me when they got married, it was just them and their attendants and they got married in a church. But no parents or nothing. It was all, and that was common.
Yeah,
I thought that was really odd that you wouldn't at least have both sets of parents there. But she said no, just them, the attendants, and the minister.
What year?
And I think it must
probably in the 30s. I think
early 40s or late 30s. I think
some of that was because weddings were not as big a deal. You didn't have the huge reception for a lot of them. It was too expensive. In the Depression, you couldn't have a reception and feed everybody. You were lucky if you got a night in Des Moines for a honeymoon, You ask women of that era, where did you have a honeymoon? Oh, we didn't have a honeymoon, or we had a night at my aunt's house, or something like that. You just didn't have the money to have a big shindig, and you didn't have the money for, if you had a picture, you were lucky. A lot of them didn't even have pictures, didn't have the money for that. So it really has changed. You hear these weddings today that cost $20,000 or $25,000, and I think, what a waste. How stupid. You could have half a house in Pella for that, That's ridiculous. So it's really changed. Any of you have any really, really old ones in your family that are in really good shape? They're probably this big around. That's the...
My mother-in-law's is in a little brown bag. And it's a whole dress and a veil.
And it's rolled up in a bag?
But it's completely satin.
Completely satin, yeah.
And satin's not very...
No, it's not very bulky.
But if you just had a little bag with a little string around it.
Okay.
And it said wedding dress.
The other thing I find a lot of women who had to get married, we'll put it that way, would often burn their dress. I run into that a lot. I'll say to women, do you still have your wedding dress? She goes, no, I was 16 and we had to get married, and after that, after I was done, after I wore it to church a couple times, I burned it. And even my husband's grandmother burned her wedding pictures. She was pregnant and she was embarrassed, and we have no wedding pictures.
My daughter wore hers for Halloween.
For Halloween. Yeah, so, and the other thing that happened to a lot of them was many women cut them down and made them into baptismal dresses for their oldest child. You find that a lot too, so a lot of them didn't, the white ones didn't survive. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Did you notice much difference in the age of the women over the years, or brides older or younger?
A lot of them, really, a lot of the brides were older than I thought that they were. When you see articles and things, my grandmother was 26, and she said that was pretty normal. And to me, today, 26 is kind of, I consider that older. I mean, there have always been women who've been married at 18 or 19, but in the 20s and 30s, brides were not terribly, terribly young. At least not upper class, especially brides that maybe had an education and stuff. That wasn't my grandma. She just was picky, I guess, about who she wanted. But she said 26 wasn't uncommonly old. So, I think, there are times you hear of women being married at 15 and 16 and 17, but they were old. They've been older than I would guess that they were. This woman in this picture told me she was 24, and that was in 1938. So, or her sister told me that.
The wedding. She has pictures like that.
Yeah, that probably late 30s then. Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost the same from far away.
And that's another interesting thing. What's happened with wedding pictures? Before 1900, the style very often was for the man to be sitting and the woman to be standing behind him. And that's very common. Or they're both standing. You rarely find a picture of the woman sitting and the man standing behind her, or both of them sitting. You just don't find that. They're either both standing or the woman's standing behind the man. That's a real common thing too. With their hand on his shoulder, yes. It's a very common look. Yeah?
When did engagement pictures start including both people? It used to just be the bride.
It used to just be the bride. My parents were married in 61, and my mother just had her picture taken.
And I heard 65.
Yeah.
Had mine.
So I don't know. I was married in 83, and by then everybody was having them taken together. But I don't know. Probably in the late 60s, 70s, somewhere in there.
Well, mine, I was married in 47, and it was just my picture.
Just yours, yeah.
And that was the way it was.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know when it was popular for the bride and the groom to actually be in separate pictures? It was,
yes.
This is the bride, this is the groom, but we don't seem to have a picture of them together.
Yes.
I guess they say it's their wedding day.
My great-grandparents have that. They were married in 1906, and we have a picture of them, and the way they're set up is that they're facing each other when you put the pictures together. But we don't have a picture of them together. We just have a head shot of both of them. So I don't know when that actually, I've never seen one in the 20s like that. So evidently after about 1915, 1910, that probably wasn't done anymore. But things go in and out of fashion for weddings and pictures just like they do now. Look at what you did at your wedding, something that's not done today, or something different that's done today that wasn't done at yours, and things go in and out of fashion.
We had both.
You had both?
Single.
Single and together? Okay. Well, if you have any other questions, yeah, go ahead.
My grandparents' picture, and my mom said it was 1912 was when they were married. and my grandpa's got a red rose, I think, a single rose, and it's pointing down in the picture. Does that mean anything?
I don't know. Maybe he was trying to cover a rip in his pants or something. You know, I don't know. I don't know.
When you see pictures with men having boutonnieres, you know, or something like that, I think they always wore them down rather than
up.
We want to have that's the way the flower grows.
Right, right.
But I think that must have been the cutaway.
Could be.
That they just wore it down. But it had a real long stem on it.
And the whole stem and everything was, wow. Yeah, I don't know. I collect wedding pictures too. I just pick them up at auctions and sales. People I don't know. I just find it fascinating to try and tell what year it is. Different photographers had different ways. You know, it's like a senior high school graduation picture. You can always tell which ones came from which studio because of certain things. Wedding pictures were the same way, and you could tell in that area which ones came from where because of that. Yeah.
Well, in that case, you should definitely not miss our bulletin board, which has about 50 or 75 years worth of wedding pictures.
Oh, great. Great.
Mothers, grandparents.
Great. Well, I have a brochure about my other program. I don't have the bridal one stuck in there, but if you want any information about it or have questions or want to pick one up or want to come up and feel anything or look at the book or anything, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, Dina, do you want to make any announcements or anything?
I just wanted to show you the door prize. It's a woman's book of changes reflecting on our mother. And Judy's going to staff, and her name's not in there, so she's going to draw something, right? Like this. Maybe you'll have one number. One number. All right. We have the winning number is, should I say who it is? It was 45. Okay, we got a winning number. Number 6, Maxine. I don't know pronunciation. Like whatever. Here. There you go. Thank you. Congratulations.
Okay. Well, you might want to take a look at the bulletin board or refreshments ready.
Refreshments are ready, and